The doorknob came off in my hand. That was the first sign, not of anything supernatural or poetic, but of how broken everything really was. The house, the marriage, me. I stood there like an idiot, holding half a doorknob in my palm while Cassidy moaned his name on the other side of the bedroom wall. Yeah, his name, not mine. She didn't even bother to close the window. The wind carried every sound like it was proud of the betrayal. I didn't scream. I didn't bang on the wall. I just looked at that brass doorknob like it could tell me what the hell I'd done wrong. 3 minutes later, I was sitting on the staircase in mismatched socks, staring at the ceiling and wondering how I became the kind of man who hears his wife cheating and worries more about the broken hardware than the broken vows. I didn't even want to be angry. I wanted instructions. A checklist. Something like, Step 1. Catch wife in the act. Step 2. Step 3. Somehow be a man? But no checklist came. Just silence, except for the rhythmic thumping behind that damn bedroom door. The same door I painted pale green 2 summers ago while she drank iced tea and told me I held the brush like a poet. Funny, right? I didn't barge in. I didn't record anything. I just sat there and listened. And somewhere between the third moan and the guy grunting, "Yeah, you like that?" I started laughing. Like, actually laughing. Not because it was funny, but because Cassidy once told me, and I quote, "Lyle, you're not even threatening enough to be cheated on." Guess I finally proved her wrong. But here's the twist. I didn't leave that night. I didn't confront her. I didn't even ask who he was. I just waited until they finished, then walked into the kitchen, boiled a kettle, and made tea like I always do. She came out 20 minutes later in his hoodie. My hoodie. Said she was just talking to a friend. I nodded, stirred my tea, took a sip. It burned. She asked if I was okay. I said I was thinking of repainting the front door. She blinked. What? I smiled, thinking maybe something red, like blood. She didn't laugh. She tilted her head and said, "What's gotten into you?" I didn't answer, because I knew. Something had gotten into me. Or maybe something had finally left. The part of me that thought love meant being quiet. That thought compromise meant surrender. That thought being soft meant I deserved less. So I went to bed. Didn't touch her. Didn't speak. And the next morning, I started becoming someone else. Not louder. Not crueler. Just less. Invisible. And believe me, she noticed. The next morning, I sliced a banana the way I always did. Even little rounds, 3mm thick, stacked neatly on toast with almond butter. But the knife didn't feel right in my hand. It was too light. Plastic-handled. Safe. Like everything I owned. Like me. Cassidy walked into the kitchen wearing my old college hoodie again, the same one that had hung untouched in the back of the closet until 2 weeks ago when I noticed it mysteriously vanish. I didn't say anything. I just kept slicing. I didn't ask her who the guy was. I didn't even mention what I heard the night before. What was the point? She'd lie. Or worse, she'd smirk. I'd seen that smirk before, during that dinner at her sister's place when she told the story of how I cried during a thunderstorm on our honeymoon. Everyone laughed. I laughed too, but inside, I felt like I was sinking. That smirk doesn't just hurt, it brands you. Cassidy poured herself coffee without looking at me. "I'm going out tonight," she said. I nodded. "With Meredith?" I asked. She paused, barely perceptible. Sure. That word again. That lazy little syllable she used when the lie wasn't worth the effort. I didn't flinch. I just said, "I might go out too." Her eyebrows twitched barely, but I caught it. "Where?" she asked, almost amused. I shrugged. "Somewhere." That was the moment I realized she didn't expect me to have a somewhere. Not anymore. I'd become her background static. A man-shaped pillow who pays bills, folds socks, and keeps the fridge full. I spent the day wandering around town like a ghost with nowhere to haunt. I didn't have friends, not the kind I could just call up and vent to. My world had been so small, so Cassidy-shaped. But something in me had shifted. I went into a bookstore, bought a used journal with a fox on the cover, and sat in a quiet coffee shop where no one knew me. I didn't write in it. I just held it. Like maybe I could write myself back into existence later. That night, when she left in a rush of perfume and silence, I waited until her taillights disappeared and then went into our bedroom. Her side of the bed was messy, not chaotic, just careless. That was the thing about Cassidy. Even her destruction looked elegant. I opened her drawer and, for the first time in years, looked, not out of spite, out of desperation. A desperate need to understand what I had become to her. And that's when I saw it. A phone. Not hers, not the one she used during the day. This one was older. A cracked corner. No case. I wouldn't have known it existed if it hadn't buzzed just then. A message from a contact named Chris Jim. The preview read, "Tonight again? I can't stop thinking about how you." It cut off. I didn't open it. I didn't need to. I felt like the air had been sucked out of my lungs. But the strange thing was, I wasn't angry. Not yet. I was humiliated. Embarrassed. Like I'd accidentally walked into the wrong room of my own life. I sat on the edge of the bed for a long time. Hours maybe. I stared at that phone like it might apologize. Like it might explain things to me better than she ever would. I didn't take a picture of the screen. I didn't confront her when she came home smelling like someone else's cologne. I just went into the bathroom and trimmed my nails, cleaned the sink, organized the drawer, because something in me was shaking, something fragile and exhausted but newly alive. It wasn't rage. Not yet. It was a quiet decision forming in the background, a ripple in the still lake I had become. The next morning, I shaved. Not the usual quick pass. I mean really shaved, straight razor, aftershave, cleaned the mirror. I put on a button-down shirt, went into the kitchen before she woke up, made coffee, and this time, when she wandered in with sleep in her eyes and that old "I'm too tired for you" energy, I smiled. Not a broken smile, not a nervous smile, a warning, because the man she thought she was crushing, he wasn't going to stay crushed for long. She didn't notice anything had changed. Not at first. I was still the same quiet figure pouring coffee every morning, asking if she wanted almond milk or cream. I still washed her favorite wine glass by hand and folded her cardigan when she tossed it over the back of the chair. And Cassidy, she thrived in that silence. It let her believe I hadn't figured her out, that I was still asleep, still harmless. But I was watching now. I noticed the way she flinched when I made plans without telling her. Just casual things, a haircut, a late-night walk, a meeting with an old coworker she didn't know. Nothing dramatic. But I could see it, the shift in her. She was used to a version of me that asked permission. The new version didn't ask. He simply moved. One evening, she walked into the living room while I was typing on my laptop. She leaned against the wall, arms crossed, and said, "You've been acting weird lately." I looked up and gave her a calm smile. Weird like, having a personality? She didn't laugh. She bit her lip, glanced at the floor. No, just different. I closed the laptop slowly. Well, people evolve. She tilted her head. Since when? I stood up. Since the night I stopped knocking on the bedroom door. For a moment, I thought she'd break. Her face twitched like she wanted to say something real. But instead, she exhaled through her nose and muttered, "I don't have time for games." And just like that, the truth slid right back under her tongue like it always did. And I let it. Because sometimes the worst lies are the ones you agree to live inside, like a shared delusion held together with fake smiles and silent agreements. I let her lie to me. Because I wasn't done yet. I didn't want revenge. Not exactly. I wanted her to see what she had dismantled, bit by bit. So I did something I hadn't done in over a decade. I went back to painting. It was something I used to love, before bills and commutes and Cassidy's passive sighs about wasting time with all that artsy stuff. I set up in the garage, dragged out my old easel, wiped the dust off the brushes. At first, it felt foolish. Childish, even. But then the first lines came. Then color. Then form. I wasn't painting her. I wasn't painting the betrayal. I was painting me. The parts of me she'd buried with years of dismissive silence. I think that's when she started to panic. She came into the garage one night, barefoot, wine glass in hand. She leaned on the doorframe like she was checking on a sick pet. "Didn't know you were still into this," she said. I didn't look up. I never stopped. You just stopped noticing. Silence. Then she asked the question I didn't expect. "Are you seeing someone?" I paused. Not because I was, but because the idea that I could, that I might, hit her like a slap. For the first time in months, she actually looked nervous. I put the brush down gently and faced her. "No," I said, "but I'm starting to understand why someone would." She didn't know what to do with that. She stared at the canvas like it was telling her secrets. "That's not fair," she said softly, suddenly trying on the role of the wounded one. "Neither was him," I replied, then turned back to the painting. She left the door half open behind her. That night, I didn't cry. I didn't pace or question myself. I just sat with the hum of the refrigerator in the kitchen and stared at the quiet stillness of the home we had built, or rather, the prison I had willingly helped decorate. I had been small for so long, but now she was starting to see it. The earthquake hadn't hit yet, but the floor was cracking. She started watching me. That's how I knew I was getting to her. At first, it was just passing glances, the kind where she pretended to look at the floor, but her eyes trailed me like a shadow. Then came the questions. Who's that texting you? Are you going out again? Why are you dressing like that? All subtle, all with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. But it was there, the unease, the flicker of confusion. Like I'd become a puzzle she didn't know how to solve anymore. And I didn't give her the pieces. I started staying out later, not to be petty, but because I could. I joined a figure drawing class at the community center. Me, the guy who used to be too shy to order coffee without checking how to pronounce the drink. Now I was sketching strangers under flickering lights while a teacher named Walt, who smelled like turpentine and cinnamon, told me my work had tension. I don't even know what that meant. But I liked how it sounded. I liked how I sounded when I told Cassidy, I'll be home late, and left without explaining why. And that's when she cracked. It happened on a Thursday. I came home and found her in the kitchen, pacing. She had wine, of course. Always wine now. Her voice was slurred, but not enough to blame it on the alcohol. Are you cheating on me? She asked, staring like she was trying to find someone else behind my face. I blinked. You really want to ask me that? She didn't answer. She looked smaller somehow, less sharp. The makeup around her eyes was smudged like she'd tried to fix something and gave up halfway through. You've been different lately, she muttered. Like you're hiding something. I leaned on the counter. Maybe I'm just tired of being the background music in your movie. That hit. I saw it land. Her shoulders dropped. Her mouth twitched like she wanted to say something biting, but the venom had dried up. Then she did something I didn't expect. She apologized. Not for the affair. Not for what I'd heard through the walls. But for the distance. For how things got off track. She even tried to reach for my hand. The same hand she hadn't touched in months. I didn't move. And that's when it really hit her. I watched her eyes flicker, not with guilt, but with fear. Fear of losing control. Cassidy was never afraid of being wrong. She was afraid of becoming irrelevant. And in that moment, I realized she didn't regret what she'd done. She regretted the fact that I was no longer begging for scraps of her attention. She pulled back her hand. I don't even know who you are anymore, she said. I gave a small smile. Neither do you. She left the room. Slammed the door, finally. After all that silence, the woman who treated drama like a soap opera she'd outgrown finally raised her voice to wood and hinges. It was almost funny. I sat at the kitchen table for a long time, staring at her empty wine glass. I remembered the first time I ever poured her a glass of wine. It was cheap, something we'd picked up from a gas station in Vermont during a road trip. She'd kissed me and called me the most thoughtful man she'd ever known. Now I was a stranger in my own home. But somehow, I wasn't sad. I felt clean. That night, I slept alone in the guest room. Not out of spite, out of choice. I wanted distance. I wanted silence on my own terms. And as I lay there staring at the ceiling, I realized something important. This wasn't about becoming the man she wanted anymore. It was about no longer being the man I had settled for. And she could feel it. She could feel me slipping through her fingers. The scariest part for Cassidy wasn't losing me. It was losing the version of me who would have stayed anyway. I don't know what she expected to happen next. Maybe she thought the apology would reset the board, that I'd crumble at the first sign of softness and go right back to folding her sweaters and pretending nothing ever happened. But I wasn't the same. And now, when I looked at her, I didn't see my wife. I saw the woman who had buried me slowly, year after year, and now couldn't recognize the ghost she'd created. 2 days passed without another word. We shared a roof and oxygen, but not much else. I slept in the guest room. I cooked for myself. I didn't ask where she was going, and I didn't answer when she asked the same. She tried to make small talk once, by the fridge, about the weather, and I responded with a nod, like she was the neighbor I barely knew. It wasn't revenge. It was quiet withdrawal, and it terrified her more than if I had screamed. Then came Saturday night. She came into my room. No knocking, just walked in, wearing the perfume she used to reserve for our date nights, the one she said made her feel expensive. Her lipstick was perfectly applied, and her blouse was just unbuttoned enough to draw attention, but still give her deniability. She sat on the edge of the bed like it was some kind of olive branch. Lyle, she said softly, we haven't been close in a long time. Maybe we could start over? I looked up at her, confused, not because I didn't understand what she meant, but because I couldn't believe she thought it would work. That this was her strategy. Flirtation as cleanup. She still thought I was him. The man who needed her to validate his existence. The man who would have jumped at the chance to pretend the other man in our bedroom never existed. I didn't move. Start over? I asked. She gave a small laugh, the kind she used when she was nervous but pretending not to be. Yeah, you and me. We've both made mistakes. I raised an eyebrow. What mistake did I make? She froze. Just for a second. Then she looked down at her hands. I mean, we stopped trying. We let things get distant. I waited, but that was it. That was her confession. We got distant. We stopped trying. No mention of him. So I said, I didn't cheat. The silence stretched. Then, quietly, she said, I didn't mean to. I stopped her. Cassidy, I heard you. Her face dropped. Completely. No more act. No more sultry voice. No more perfume confidence. Just silence. Real, terrifying silence. When? She whispered. Long enough ago, I said. And I've waited every day since to see if you'd tell the truth. You didn't. She stood up, slowly, arms crossed over her chest now like a shield. It was a mistake, she said, almost robotic. It didn't mean anything. I looked at her like I'd never seen her before. Then why did you do it more than once? That did it. The mask slipped. She sat down in the chair across from me, and for the first time in years, she didn't talk. She didn't lie. She didn't fight. She just sat. And in that silence, I saw everything. She wasn't in control anymore. She was exposed. And she didn't know what to do with a version of me that no longer begged. I got up and went into the bathroom. I shut the door gently, turned on the light, and stared at myself in the mirror. My heart was racing. My throat was dry. But I saw it. I finally saw it. The man staring back at me wasn't powerful. He wasn't confident. He was tired, deeply tired, but he wasn't weak anymore. He was awake. And the mirror didn't lie. That night, I didn't cry. I didn't punch walls. I just lay in bed and thought about how many years I had given to someone who measured love and attention, not devotion. Someone who saw loyalty as weakness. Someone who mistook my gentleness for emptiness. The next morning, I brewed 2 cups of coffee. I brought one to her room and left it by the door, a quiet gesture of civility. No note. No explanation. Then I walked back to my room, sat down, and opened my laptop. And I started planning something I never thought I'd do. Leave. But not in rage. Not in panic. In control. There was a suitcase in the attic that I hadn't touched in over a decade. I bought it back when Cassidy and I planned to travel more. Paris, maybe, or Oregon coastlines. It still had the tags on it. I dusted it off like it was an artifact from another version of myself. One that used to believe we were building something worth escaping with. That morning, while she was in the shower, I brought it down quietly and set it in the guest room. I didn't pack much. Just the essentials, laptop, chargers, a few shirts, my journals, and one framed photo of my dad and me on a fishing trip before he passed. I left behind all the expensive things. The watch she got me for our anniversary that she said made me look important. The shoes I hated but wore for her. The cufflinks I never used. I didn't want symbols. I wanted my life back. Cassidy noticed the suitcase the next day. Of course she did. She was never good at noticing pain, but she was brilliant at detecting threats. I was in the kitchen, pouring coffee, when she walked in and said, "Going somewhere?" Her voice was casual, but her fingers were gripping her phone too tightly. I didn't flinch. Eventually, I replied. She blinked, then gave a laugh, short, unsure. Is that supposed to be cryptic? I shook my head. No, just honest. She watched me for a long moment, then leaned against the counter. You're really doing this? Over a mistake. I met her eyes. It wasn't the mistake. It was the cover-up. The way you buried it, and kept walking like I didn't matter. Like I wouldn't notice. Like I didn't deserve to know. She rolled her eyes, a last attempt at control. It didn't mean anything. You're blowing it out of proportion. Then why do I feel like I've been dying for years? I asked. She didn't have an answer. Just silence. She wasn't used to that either, me calling out the quiet. I went to work that day like normal, but something had shifted. I didn't tell anyone what was happening. I didn't broadcast it. I just started making arrangements. Found a short-term rental on the edge of town, signed a 3-month lease, and paid the deposit. The landlord didn't even ask questions. Fresh start, he said. I nodded. Something like that. At work, I asked to move to remote status. We had the infrastructure for it, and they owed me enough favors to agree without resistance. I started looking into a small town upstate where a friend of a friend had a gallery, nothing fancy, just a space that occasionally hosted community shows. The idea wasn't to run away and reinvent myself. It was to reclaim the version of me that had been swallowed by years of shrinking myself to fit her moods. Back at home, Cassidy began trying harder. Not in the way I had always wanted, not with honesty or real reflection, but with behavior. She cooked dinner twice that week, something she hadn't done since the pandemic. She asked about my day. She complimented my shirt. "You look really good lately," she said once, voice soft. I didn't respond. Not because I wanted to punish her. I just didn't believe it. I didn't believe her anymore. Her praise felt like bait, and I was done being hooked. That Friday, she made my favorite meal, baked salmon with lemon, wild rice, asparagus. I sat down, ate in silence. When she asked if I wanted to watch something after, I shook my head and said I had emails to finish. She followed me to the hallway, hand on my arm. "Lyle, come on. I'm trying." And for the first time, I turned to her without flinching and said, "Now you are. When it's too late." She froze. And I walked away. It didn't feel powerful. It didn't feel cinematic. It felt quiet. But the kind of quiet that follows an earthquake, when the dust still hangs in the air and you're not sure what's still standing. That night, I sat on the edge of the bed and stared at the wall, not because I was lost, but because I had just remembered something. Years ago, on our third date, Cassidy had said she hated men who let life happen to them. Back then, I laughed and said I didn't. I said I was deliberate, patient. She didn't believe me then. She doesn't believe it now. But soon she will. Because I had a suitcase, a key, a place to go. And this time, she wouldn't hear me leave. She'd feel it. The night before I planned to leave, the power went out. It was poetic, in a cruel sort of way, as if the universe decided to dim the lights for the last scene of a show that had run too long. I sat in the living room with a single candle flickering on the coffee table, the suitcase zipped and hidden behind the couch. Cassidy was in the kitchen, rummaging for batteries and flashlights, muttering under her breath like it was the storm's fault the tension between us had hit a breaking point. The air felt too still, like it was waiting. She walked in and set a flashlight down next to me. "This house is a mess," she said, trying to sound light. "Feels like it's collapsing." I didn't answer. Because it was. She sat down across from me. I could barely see her in the candlelight, but I could tell her eyes were on me, searching. "Lyle," she said slowly, "can we talk?" I tilted my head slightly, but didn't say yes. She took that as permission. "I know I messed up. I know I hurt you. And I wish I could take it back. But I can't. So all I can do is be here. Be better." I still didn't speak. She leaned in, voice low now, more serious. "You think I don't see what you're doing? The suitcase. The late nights. The distance. I see it. And I hate it. Because I know I deserve it. But I also know you. You don't want to be alone, Lyle. You hate silence. You hate space. You need us." I looked at her then, really looked. And for the first time in my life, I realized she wasn't trying to keep me. She was trying to keep the version of me that made her feel powerful. But that version of me was already dead. "I do hate silence," I said quietly. "But I hate being invisible more." Something shifted in her face, not sadness. Not regret. Fear. It was subtle, but unmistakable. The fear of losing something she thought would never leave. She moved closer, her hand brushing mine. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I'll make it right." And then she started to cry. Not loud sobs. Not the dramatic, chest-heaving kind. Just quiet, trembling tears sliding down her cheeks. Real ones. I could tell. Maybe the first honest thing she'd done in months. But they weren't about love. They were about loss. About control. She was mourning the version of me that had once crawled through fire to keep her happy. And now I was sitting in the dark, unbothered by the flickering candle or the shaking windows, ready to vanish without a scene. She grabbed my hand, tightly now, desperation bleeding through. "Lyle, please." And for 1 second, I hesitated. Because I'm still me. I'm still the man who wishes things had gone differently. The man who once believed in forever. Who held her hair back when she was sick. Who stayed up when she worked late. Who memorized her coffee order and her laugh, and the way she always double-knotted her shoelaces because she said it kept her grounded. But then I remembered something I had forgotten until that very moment, a voicemail I found on the hidden phone 2 weeks ago from him. The man from the bedroom. In it, he laughed and said, "If your husband ever finds out, I'll just tell him you needed a real man." She never deleted it. Never thought she had to. So I pulled my hand away gently, stood up, and blew out the candle. The room went black. And in the darkness, I said just loud enough for her to hear, You don't get to cry and keep me in a cage at the same time. I walked out of the room, the echo of my steps the only sound between us. I didn't slam doors. I didn't shout. I just went upstairs, lay down, slept in peace for the first time in years. Tomorrow I would leave. Not to punish her, not to prove anything, just because I was finally free. And that freedom didn't need witnesses. The morning I left, the house was still. Not quiet in the tense, suffocating way it had been for months, but calm. Like a storm had passed through and finally moved on. The suitcase sat by the front door. I had showered, shaved, packed. No dramatic notes. No long speeches. Just closure written in the details, my keys on the counter, the joint bank card left in the drawer, and my name removed from the Wi-Fi account. She was still asleep. Or maybe she wasn't. Either way, I wasn't going to wake her. Not for this. I walked through the room slowly, not to reminisce, but to say goodbye to the man I'd been in each one. The man who stood frozen in the kitchen while she laughed at someone else's message. The man who lay awake listening to her voice behind a closed door, calling someone else baby. The man who begged in silence. Who took up less and less space until he didn't recognize his own shadow. He wasn't coming with me. I opened the front door just as the first light of morning crept across the lawn. The sky was soft gray, promising a clean day. I stepped outside, suitcase wheels bumping gently against the porch steps. And then, just before I reached the car, I heard it. The sound of bare feet on wood floors. The creak of the hallway. The soft click of the bedroom door. She had woken up, but I didn't turn around. I heard her voice behind me, small and uncertain. Lyle? I paused at the car, hand on the handle. Where are you going? She asked, almost breathless. I took a deep breath. Not angry. Not bitter. Just done. Home, I said quietly. She didn't reply. She didn't beg. Because deep down, she knew this wasn't about leaving her. It was about returning to myself. I opened the car door, got in, and started the engine. As I pulled away, I didn't look back at the house. I had nothing there anymore. No hatred. No revenge. Just peace. And that was enough. 3 hours later, I arrived at the little rental I had quietly secured. It wasn't much. Small porch, creaky floors, a view of the hills that turned gold in the afternoon sun. But it felt like possibility. I spent that first day unpacking, breathing. No one knew me here. No one expected anything from me. I made tea, sat on the porch, and watched birds squabble over nothing in particular. And for the first time in longer than I could remember, I smiled without effort. Over the next weeks, I did small things. Simple, kind things for myself. I walked in the mornings. I painted in the evenings. I joined a reading group at the library. I got a haircut not because I needed one, but because I wanted to see myself in the mirror and not flinch. I even went on a few coffee dates, awkward, light, nothing serious. But I laughed. And someone laughed with me. Not at me. And slowly, the shame washed off. The self-doubt dried up. The voice in my head that once whispered, "You're not enough," grew quieter. It didn't vanish overnight, but it no longer owned me. Weeks later, I received a text from Cassidy. It was short. "I miss you. You look happier." I wasn't ready for that. I stared at it for a long time, and then I deleted it. Not out of spite, out of freedom, because I had nothing left to prove. Not to her, not to anyone. The sun was setting again outside, painting the porch in amber. I stepped out with my mug and let the breeze hit my face. Somewhere behind me, inside the house, a kettle whistled. A door clicked shut, and in that small, beautiful silence, I realized I hadn't lost myself. I had finally come home.